Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for joining me today on the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Souza. Thank you once again for being here today and for listening. We'll be looking at last night's domination by the Houston Texans as they beat the Miami Dolphins handily. We'll talk about the rest of the Week 8 matchups in the next two segments following. We'll talk about each game. We'll break them down. And then, of course, I'll follow that with some news and notes in the NFL and some college football notable matchups for this weekend. As we're heading down to the nitty-gritty for college football, we're getting closer to the end of their season, of course, as the NFL heads toward their halfway point. So, Week 8, we're almost halfway there through the NFL. Doesn't it feel that way, to be honest? It's a little sad, if I'm being completely honest, that to say that out loud, that it's halfway through, that we're approaching the midway point. So what happens with the NFL? It seems like it takes forever for the season to get here, and then when it does, it's over in the blink of an eye. And depending on who your favorite team is, it's already over. However, most teams still have a chance. There are teams that might be on the outside looking in, maybe like the Miami Dolphins now, who fall to 4-4 after last night's loss to Houston. You know, it was a low-scoring game in the first half until the Texans kind of blew this thing open, but we saw Danny Amendola throw a touchdown pass, which was odd. We saw Deshaun Watson go 16-20, 239, and 5 touchdowns. Osweiler 21-37 for the Dolphins, 241, and a pick. And again, an Amendola touchdown pass. Didn't see that coming. If you started Amendola on your fantasy team, you're happy about that. But looking at the rushing leaders, we saw the Dolphins give 12 carries to Gore and Kenyon Drake. So Kenyon Drake, he goes 12 for 58. Gore 12 for 53. Drake also pitched in with a touchdown. Lamar Miller had a big day for Houston, 18 for 133 and a touchdown. There was a little bit of a revenge game for Lamar Miller. As we know, he's a former Miami Dolphin. He's actually number 8 on their all-time rushing list for the Dolphins, which seems weird to say because I don't think he was there for a great amount of time. But I guess when you think about it, the Dolphins don't have the best running backs in their history, so it kind of makes sense that way. The story of the game, though, was the passing attack for the Texans, despite how good of a game Lamar Miller actually had. Will Fuller, 5 catches, 124 yards and touchdown. He looked dynamic last night. He looked fast, like he always does. The Texans looked like they were in a groove, passing-wise, but some news on Will Fuller coming up. DeAndre Hopkins, he had a tough matchup last night as he was faced up against Xavier Howard, one of the most underrated players in the NFL, one of the best corners playing this game right now. Hopkins still finds a way to do it, though. 6 for 82, 2 touchdowns. He also had an incredible one-handed catch where he caught the ball between his legs. It didn't count. It won't go in the stat sheet, but if you get a chance to check out last night's highlights, look for that play. He got called for offense pass interference. But, man, what an incredible, incredible catch by a player that has an incredible catch radius. DeAndre Hopkins, again, 6 for 82. So, what does this mean? Where do we go from here? For the Texans, it means they have a strong control of the AFC South. they're definitely trending up. We talked about it yesterday on the football podcast. They're a team that's trending up. The rest of the teams in their division, it looks like those teams are trending down. Tennessee at 3-4, Jacksonville at 3-4, Indianapolis 2-5. In fact, if I'm being honest, of those three teams, I think Indianapolis is playing the best football, and they're 2-5. So I feel like it's Houston's division to lose. 5-3 now. Go the Texans, putting a little bit of distance, at least one game between their counterparts in the AFC South. We'll see if they can stretch out maybe that lead a little bit. It's just the Texans' offense and defense just look good right now. And for Jacksonville, for Tennessee, I just feel like there's so many question marks. For Tennessee, the offense is nowhere to be seen half the time. The defense keep them in games. And Mariota and that offense, they don't do anything to help that team win a lot of times. And then we look at Jacksonville, same thing. Defense, solid. Offense does not help them out. So, do any of the teams in the AFC South have a chance to make some noise? I think the Colts at 2-5 is going to be tough for them. They do play the Raiders this weekend, so maybe they can get on a winning track. Maybe they can push down the road, but they'll have to turn that thing around now. As for the Jaguars, they host the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday. Both teams are 3-4. I'll talk about that game in detail in the next segment, but it's a tough game. If Jacksonville loses, they go to 3-5. So, if you're the other teams in the AFC South, you're looking at Houston like, okay, Houston is looking fairly strong. We need to start winning these games because we don't want to fall behind. Can Houston go on a little bit of a run? I think we'll see. We'll find out. The offense, top 10 in the NFL currently. The defense, the same. I look at the Texans' schedule and I see a team that can definitely go on a little bit of a run. Here are their upcoming opponents. At Denver, at Washington. They host Tennessee, they host Cleveland, and they host Indianapolis. Then they're on the road to the Jets. So this schedule definitely opens up. They end the season at Philadelphia and at Houston. But, man, at Jacksonville. I said Houston. This is a schedule, I think, that's opening up very nicely for them. I could see them going on a roll. It's actually not crazy to think about that they could actually host a bye, maybe make the playoffs and, have a bye week and host that first playoff game. Because when you look at the AFC, Kansas City's at 6-1. The Chargers are behind Kansas City at 5-2, but still, Houston 5-3 right now. The AFC North leaders 3-2-1. That's Pittsburgh. Cincinnati and Baltimore have a chance to go to 5-3 this weekend. And then New England 5-2. So, the Chiefs have a loss. Patriots have 2. But then after that, you look at Houston at 3. Pittsburgh has 2, but they have a tie. Cincinnati, Baltimore. Other than those teams plus the Chargers, there's a little bit of a gap in the AFC. So can the Texans get on a run here? Can they establish themselves as a great team in the AFC? I think they can. Deshaun Watson is a very, very good young quarterback. As long as they can keep players off of him, if he can stay healthy, I could see them in any game. I don't think that they're the best team in the AFC. But when you have a guy like Hopkins, a guy like Watson, and then you have guys on the other side of the ball like Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, there's some playmakers here. There's some playmakers, and I like them if they get in shootouts. I like them if they get in tough, grind-them-out type of victories. I think they could win in multiple ways, which is important because if you're talking about being one of the best teams, whether it's the league, division, you need to be a versatile team. You got to be able to win in more ways than one. And the teams that are able to win more ways than one are the teams that usually survive in playoffs in where they have to go on the road, and maybe they're used to playing shootouts, but they can win 17-14, 17-13 on the road. You look at a team like New England. We know that Tom Brady's great. We know that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's arguably the best quarterback in NFL history. But that team wins in different ways all the time. They can speed you up. They can slow you down. Ball control offense, short passing. And then some games they'll throw the ball down the field. They'll take advantage of corners. They'll take advantage of safeties over the top. You'll see Gronk get behind defenders. Or they have the death by a million paper cuts approach that they love to employ. Ball control passing offense that the Patriots love to do with Julian Edelman, James White, Gronkowski even in the short to intermediate range. But those short passes that the Patriots love to do to control the game. But then they can open it up if need be. And I think the Texans have that ability. Of course, I'm not saying that they have the same players. I don't even think Watson is close to Tom Brady. But he's a playmaker. He's a smart quarterback. He's accurate enough. They can throw the ball short. They can get in a shootout type game where it's 30, 40-yard passes down the field. We've seen Deshaun Watson face Tom Brady. We've seen him duel him. So the teams that can win in multiple ways are the teams I believe are the most dangerous. We see like when you look at it, I see a team like Pittsburgh, who's a very good football team. But if I had to say right now who I'd rather have in a big game, I'd probably go with Houston just because I think their defense is really good. And I would expect that game, like if it was Houston and Pittsburgh, to be a shootout, but I would take Houston there because I think their defense will be able to make a couple more plays out to win that game, and their offenses are both very good. But I told you I had injury news. Will Fuller, the young, speedy wide receiver for the Houston Texans. We know that Watson loves to throw it deep to him. It appears he has torn his ACL. That's what the field tests, the initial tests by the trainers, have suggested. And in the NFL, when a team fears that a player has a torn ACL, I'd say there's about a 95% chance that thing checks out when they actually do the MRI. The field tests that they use are pretty they're pretty precise. I mean, in terms of they know when a player has suffered a major injury pretty quickly. They will always assess it, see what it looks like, see how bad it actually is. But not often does a team fear a torn ACL and it ends up being something else. So we'll take a look and we'll wait for kind of the news on that. But as we know of right now, it looks like he will miss the remainder of the season. And if that's the case, how does that affect the Houston Texans offense? DeAndre Hopkins, he's a great player in his own right, but when you have a guy like Fuller, when you have Fuller as the Robin to Hopkins as Batman, you start to see that teams will lose focus on one of them and that player will burn them. Well, now, if Fuller is gone, how does that affect the offense? I think a good start would be getting back wide receiver Kiki Kuti. He had a really nice beginning of the season with Houston. He has, over the last couple weeks, been a little hurt, but he should be back. He has a hamstring injury. He should be back. I don't know if he'll be back this week, but he should be back for the long haul. That will be a player that could take some of the weight off of DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. He likes to run a lot of plays from the slot, but we'll see how creative the Texans get. Another thing, though, I spoke about Lamar Miller having a good game last night, but they get Deontay Foreman back from the IR. They could have him back as early as this week. He's a running back Houston really likes. They invested a third-round pick in him. So he's a player that possibly adds a spark to this team. I'm not the biggest Lamar Miller fan. I think that he's just a very average player in the NFL. If there's 4 yards there for him, he gets 4 yards. Like, I don't think he really does anything terribly special. So maybe Foreman can be a player that can really make an impact, be a impact player for this offense that's losing an impact player in Will Fuller. So now we look at the Dolphins, and I don't really know what to say about them. They're 4-4. They started off 3-0. I wasn't a believer in them then at 3-0, and going 1-4 in the last 5, I'm not a believer in them now. Just, they're bottom 10 in offense and defense, yet they're 500. So I've been feeling they've been playing above their head, but at 4-4, they have an opportunity to turn things around. I really thought that if Osweiler had a good game yesterday, maybe he would put some doubts in the minds of Adam Gase and other offensive coaches for the Dolphins in terms of maybe getting another start or maybe having a quarterback controversy there in Miami. Not that Tannehill has been bad or anything, but we are talking about a franchise who's had to deal with Tannehill's injuries and things like that. And I feel like Adam Gase is one of those guys. If you're on a roll, just keep going with it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But Osweiler had a very pedestrian game yesterday, so I think he reverts back to the backup role. Assuming Tannehill can go next game, he is recovering from an AC joint injury to his throwing shoulder. So we will see if Tannehill will be back for the next game. Now, the Dolphins do obviously have that extended rest period. They have that those extra days off, considering that they just played Thursday night. So they play their next game. They play the New York Jets, and they'll actually be hosting this game on the 4th. So extra rest. We'll see if Tannehill is back in the saddle as a starting quarterback for the Dolphins. But we look at some of their next games. They host the Jets. They're at Green Bay. They're at Indianapolis, and they host the Bills. I think that's a favorable schedule for the next 4 games. It gets a little tougher after that. Patriots, Vikings, Jaguars, Bills to end the season. But those next 4 games are crucial. You got to believe the Dolphins have to go at least 2-2 to stick around this thing. For me, I think the division is lost. It's New England's. But there is a wild card spot. The problem is the AFC North has 3 good teams: Bengals, Ravens, Steelers. The AFC West, I've already got not San Diego. I always still say that. Los Angeles Chargers. I have them penciled in as the first wildcard team if they don't win the division. Let's remember, as good as the Chiefs have been, the Chargers are right on their heels. So there's one wildcard spot open, in my opinion, but the Dolphins most likely would need to go 3-1 in this next 4 stretch to have an opportunity to be in the conversation. I'm just not inspired by this football team. I think, if Frank Gore is your preferred running back, an old Frank Gore, one of my favorite players of all time, but he's well past his prime. He's still a decent running back, but, you could arguably say he's the Dolphins' best offensive player, which is saying something. Albert Wilson out for the year. Kenny Stills was hurt yesterday. I'm not sure if he'll be back. Devontae Parker had a very good game for the Dolphins, but they played him out of necessity. He's been a guy who's been in the doghouse of Adam Gase, former first-round pick, 6 catches, 134 yards. I wonder if he can be the spark that they need, but I also wonder if he's the guy that could be on the trading block. He had a good game. Maybe the Dolphins, who value him as a backup, maybe they try and they recoup something for that number 1 pick that first round pick that they used on him, kind of like what the Raiders did with Amari Cooper. I'm not sure Parker could fetch that return, but hey, it only takes 1, like they say. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the trade market, gets traded, but again, if he stays on the team, could he be the spark? We'll see. Anyways, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the NFL Week 8 matchups. We have 12 on the slate for Sunday, so we'll break those down in detail, what to look for, what to expect. We'll do that in the next 2 segments, and we'll do that right after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast again. I'm your host, Mark Souza. We're taking a look at Week 8. We just talked about the Thursday Night Football matchup, Deshaun Watson carving up the Dolphins' defense. We look at Week 8. These weeks become more and more pivotal. Teams who struggled in the early season, these are the games that can help them turn their season around, but they have to start getting hot at the right time. The next couple weeks, weeks 8 to 10, is usually where we see a little separation in football between the teams who are looking at top 10 picks and the teams who are looking at possible playoff berths. I think we have about 5 or 6 teams right now that you can safely say are not involved in the playoff talk. Oakland, Giants, Cardinals, 49ers at least, maybe the Colts, maybe the Browns. I'd also throw Buffalo in there. I don't see them turning anything around, especially with their rookie quarterback who has struggled, is still better than Derek Anderson and Nathan Peterman, and he looks like he is still hurt. So, other than that, some notable matchups. I'll start off with a matchup that is not so notable and get that one out of the way so we can talk about games that matter. The 49ers will play Arizona. They'll go down to the desert. They just played them a couple weeks back. Arizona was a winner in that game. 5 turnovers for the Niners the first time they played. A team that continues to turn the football over. They score points, but they turn the ball over. Arizona, the last time we saw them was that terrible Thursday night matchup last week where they got crushed at home by Denver, which led to the firing of Mike McCoy. The team, I understand, maybe has a lack of talent. Maybe with the rookie quarterback, when their struggles, they're not such a good football team. But I still think David Johnson is a really good football player, and they just have to find ways to get him in space. We take a look every week for the Cardinals. You look at the box score, you say, wow, David Johnson's not good. I disagree. They don't give him the ball in advantageous positions. So now the role of offensive coordinator has been handed to Byron Leftwich, a first-time offensive coordinator in the NFL. I'm very skeptical about him considering that he was on the Cardinals staff last year and they decided to go outside and bring in Mike McCoy as their offense coordinator and not select Byron Leftwich. So if you didn't believe in him in the first time, what makes me believe in you believing in him the second time? That's kind of my outlook on them. But with that said, I don't think anybody could have been worse than what we saw last week than Mike McCoy. The guy does his rookie quarterback no favors. We heard that maybe the playbook is too difficult at this point for Rosen. There's too many concepts. They need to bring him in. He's a rookie. This is not an indictment on your quarterback. This is an indictment on your offense. You got to work him in, especially early in the year. You started him early. You have to you have to create an offense and call plays that are conducive to his ability and his cognitive process at this early stage in his career. Will Byron Leftwich be that guy to help? He might. He's a former quarterback, so he knows what it's like to be a young quarterback in this league. He knows what it's like to face defenses as a rookie, as a young quarterback, where, these guys are experienced across from you. They've seen every quarterback in the league, and you're trying to break in. So maybe with that empathy, that will help Byron Leftwich in their goal to turn this around for the Cardinals. But 1-6 Arizona, 1-6 Niners. If I'm being honest, I feel like I see the Niners bouncing back and winning this game just because, it is a first round, or it is a first game for Byron Leftwich as an OC. I expect some growing pains. I think it'll be positive in the end. Can't be worse. But I like the Niners here on the road to get a little bit of revenge. I'm thinking to score something like 27-20. We'll move on. No one wants to talk about that game anymore. Let's go Eagles-Jaguars, because that game is a spicy matchup. 2, 3, and 4 teams. 2 teams who had great seasons last year. Of course, the Eagles are the defending champions. Jacksonville, they lose to Tom Brady in the AFC Championship. So both teams are trying to get things fixed, quote unquote, as they travel across the pond to London. So this game is in England, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. I don't think you East Coast folks understand. When these games happen in London, they're literally at 6 or 7 in the morning. I mean, on the West Coast. Just imagine that. So you have it lucky this time. But this game, I mean, as the record shows, 2 teams that have struggled, 2 teams looking to get back to where they were. I like Philadelphia to go on the road. I guess they're both on the road, but Philadelphia is technically the road team in this matchup. I like them to win just because I can't trust Blake Bortles right now. I just cannot see. I don't feel confident they can score over 20 points on offense. I feel confident that the Eagles can, despite facing a tough defense in Jacksonville. Still, this is a game where I feel like Blake Bortles can make some noise we'll see what he has in him. I was interested in hearing about Malcolm Jenkins talk about how when he watches a film on Bortles, he thinks that Kaepernick should be in the NFL, which is kind of a slap in the face of Blake Bortles. Will this matter? I bet he thinks it will. This is bulletin board material. We'll see if the Jaguars use this and Blake Bortles use this. But I see Philadelphia winning this football game. Eagles 30, Jaguars 17. Why don't we move on? Other NFL action. Jets. They travel to Chicago to face Trubisky and that offense that's been revitalized for the Bears. Sam Darnold, rookie quarterback, will have to go against that tough defense led by Khalil Mack. It just seems like it's a game that Chicago should win easily, as we see the Jets. They come into the game with many injuries. Bilal Powell suffered a serious neck injury last week. He's out for the season. They have some injuries on the defensive side of the football. Bears are at home. Trubisky's playing well. I like them to win this game. I don't know if it'll be particularly close. I am worried that because it is a road game for the Jets, that it could get out of hand. I like Chicago to win this game 34-20. So we move on. Talked about 3 games here. We have many more to get through. So Buccaneers and Bengals. Cincinnati hosting Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay 3-3, Cincinnati 4-3. Both are surprising records for me. The Bengals have been surprising in a positive way this year, although that lasting impression of them leaves a bad taste in my mouth, as they were just dismantled by the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought that it was a game that would be kind of a shootout. Andy Dalton against that Chiefs defense, which has allowed a lot of points, a lot of yards, a 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. But the Chiefs defense somehow controlled that game in addition to their great offense. I am a little bit worried about the Bengals for the rest of the season. For the Bucs, they are what they are. They chuck it, they give it up. They score a lot, they give up a lot. The Bengals are similar, in my opinion. They're a similar team. I just think they're a little bit better on defense, but not by much. However, I do like them at home to beat Jameis Winston in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like Cincinnati to get back on track to go to 5-3 and keep their standing in the AFC as a potential playoff team. I do expect this game to be high scoring. 38-31 Cincinnati. It's my prediction. We'll move on. Now, if you were with me yesterday on the last episode, I talked about a must-win game for 2 teams, Seattle at Detroit. Those are the 2 teams that I feel this is an early season must-win game. I know it's only week 8, but when you look at the schedules for these two teams, when you look at the NFC and how it's shaping up to be a sprint, you look at each division. Detroit's not only trying to stay in the division race, they're trying to stay in the NFC playoff race. Seattle, they're comfortably behind Los Angeles, but they're comfortably in front of Arizona and San Francisco. They look like they'll be second place in division, but if they have aspirations of making it to the playoffs, this is a game that they need. They travel on the road, coming off a bye. Russell Wilson, their last game, they crushed Oakland 27-3. This is an interesting football game. I feel like this is a game, though, that there'll be a lot of running. We know Seattle likes to control the ball. They run at a higher rate than every other team in the league. And Detroit, we've seen over the last few weeks, shift their offense a little bit more to a run focus. Kerryon Johnson has been super impressive for them. LeGarrette Blount had 10 carries last game. Kerryon had 19. They like to run the football a little bit more than they have in previous years. And, of course, Seattle likes to keep that thing low scoring, keep Russell Wilson free. Don't let him take any hits. It's a tough game to call, guys. I do like Detroit, though. They're at home. I like Kerryon Johnson to have another good game. I think he'll be relied on. I like 24-20 Detroit Lions. So, moving on. After this, we'll take a quick break. So, we'll look at one more game. AFC West battle. Denver Broncos, they go to Arrowhead to face the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes and that offense. It's a tall order for this Denver team. Denver coming off that impressive win against Cardinals, a very lackluster Arizona Cardinals team. It almost felt like a bye week. Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, they'll look to limit the damage that Patrick Mahomes can have. As we've seen, nobody's really stopped the Chiefs, even in their loss. This offense for Kansas City, led by Mahomes, Kareem Hunt, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill. I don't know if there's a more daunting, group of players, at least offensive players in the NFL. I'll take those four. With the ability between those four, the speed, the matchup problems those players create. I mean, Mahomes is a matchup nightmare. Hunt, he can do it all. Kelsey, maybe the most physically gifted tight end in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, fastest man in the league. I don't know how the Broncos win this game. Do I think they can score? Yeah. Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton, Demaryius Thomas, Phillip Lindsay. I wouldn't be surprised if those guys put up numbers. But I can't for 1 second think that this Chiefs team will be limited enough on offense and Denver will do enough on offense themselves to win this game. So Kansas City wins this game. Kansas City wins this game 34-27. So go ahead and lock that one in. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have 6 more games to go. We'll break those down. And then, of course, in the last segment following, I talked about college football, some notable matchups there. Also, an interesting story regarding officiating in the NFL. We'll talk about those things right when I get back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back with the GSMC Football Podcast. Thanks once again for joining me today. Of course, if you haven't checked other podcasts out on the GSMC network, please do so. If we have fantasy football, that show will be coming up right after this. We have a sports show, basketball, baseball, MMA, you name it, we got it. So, if you are interested in more than just football, please take a look. Let's continue our football conversation, though, as the Washington Redskins travel to play the New York Giants in an NFC East rivalry match. Giants at 1-6. You know, I thought they played okay last game against the Falcons. Thought they had a lot of fight. But they suffer another loss. And the question now becomes, how long until Eli is no longer the starting quarterback of the New York Giants? I personally believe that he will not be traded at the deadline. I believe that he will remain on the Giants roster. But at some point, they're going to have to move on. They're going to have to see what they have in Alex Tanney. The Giants are looking at a top 5 draft pick. Please look at every quarterback on your roster before you go ahead and draft a quarterback. Will it make a big difference? No. But hey, if you have a diamond in the rough on your roster, you should find that out now instead of later. The Eli Manning course has been ran. I don't put all the blame on him at all, but I think it's just time for everybody to move on. The Redskins, I take a look at them. A very interesting football team led by Alex Smith. They're not an exciting team. They're a very boring team, but they can get the job done at times. We've seen them with some impressive wins. They're at 4-2. When I look at their schedule, it's interesting to me. You know, they blow out Green Bay. They get blown out by the Saints. They get blown out by the Colts. They beat the Cowboys last week. They beat the Panthers the week before. They're on a little bit of a nice run right here. They don't score a whole lot of points. And that's a kind of game that they can win against the Giants, who themselves don't score a lot of points. So, who will win? I say the Redskins. The Redskins win this football game. I think they're just a more balanced team. I believe they'll give Eli fits on Sunday. The Washington defense can really put the hurt on him. That Giants offensive line, led by the overpaid Nate Solder, is still a disaster. It's been a disaster. It continues to be a disaster. I don't know what will change. You know, I know that Saquon Barkley is a special player, but the Giants still have not addressed quarterback and offensive line. Not well enough, at least. Will they do that this offseason? I bet they will, but it won't help them today. It won't help them this weekend. Washington will win this football game 24-13. Let's take a look at maybe a game that's a little bit more exciting, but another rivalry. Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baker Mayfield will get his chance to play the Steelers for the first time. And as we know, this game, their first matchup earlier this season, was incredibly competitive as they tied 21-21. But that, of course, was when Tyrod Taylor was a quarterback. Now we get to see Baker Mayfield. Steelers are also playing a lot better. Feel like they're in their midseason groove even without Le'Veon Bell. Sounds like they'll have Le'Veon Bell back next week. But as for this game, it'll be James Conner again for the Steelers running the football. It's a tough game. We know that this rivalry has been swung hard in one way over recent, and not just recent, but over decades now. Pittsburgh Steelers should win this football game. I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland wins in an upset. These teams know each other really well. But I like Pittsburgh. They're at home. When Pittsburgh's at home, they're a different team. They're just a different animal. And I like Pittsburgh to win this game. I think we'll see a score of something like 31-27. nice competitive football game. I think the Browns will come ready to play. But the Steelers' offensive talent is just too much. Let's take a look at the Ravens and the Panthers. The 4-2 Panthers, the 4-3 Ravens. One of the more intriguing games on the slate is we see that Ravens defense face Cam Newton in Carolina. One interesting note, Cam Newton, one of the bottom 2 quarterbacks in the NFL when it comes to facing blitzes. His efficiency, his rating, his numbers go way down when blitzed. The Ravens are the team that blitzes the most in the NFL. This could cause Cam and the Panthers some problems, and I think it will. Joe Flacco's quietly put together a decent season. John Brown, Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, not a bad collection of receivers. They won't wow you, but John Brown with that speed, he's having a very nice season as a new Baltimore Raven. Michael Crabtree, we know, possession receiver, has been coming on strong as of late too. Christian McCaffrey started off the season pretty hot for Carolina, but we've seen his role shrink a little bit recently. Number of carries he's gotten, number of receptions gone down. I think it'll be a tough day at the office for McCaffrey, as the Ravens, with their very physical defense, will be keying on him, even when they're blitzing. So, interesting matchup. Carolina's at home. They're playing good ball too at 4-2. I just think that the style of Baltimore will win this football game. But with Baltimore in that offense, I don't think they score a lot of points. So it should be an entertaining game. Should come down to a last possession. But I do like Baltimore to outlast Carolina by a score of 23-21. Why don't we move on? We have 3 games left to go. This one could get ugly. This has a potential to have a huge falling out. And this game, of course, is Indianapolis at Oakland. Now, I know, not very exciting. It's not a game that any of you, unless you're Colts or Raiders fans, or just football nerds in general, are going to be seeking out. This is a game for most people, most casual fans, they won't care for. But Oakland Raiders, how will they fare without Amari Cooper? How will Derek Carr in that offense work now with Jordy Nelson, Martavis Bryant, Doug Martin, Jalen Richard, Jared Cook? No Marshawn Lynch as he's on IR. No Amari Cooper as he's in Dallas. This thing could get ugly, guys. If the Colts get out to a lead in this game, if the game itself gets ugly, I think scenes in Oakland might get ugly, as we know this team is moving to Las Vegas. I don't think they were expecting a total rebuild to happen in the first 6 weeks of the NFL season. But that's what they got. So, how supportive will this fan base be? Will we see empty seats? Will we see angry fans? Will we see Derek Carr struggle? Will we hear boos? Maybe the Raiders will win and none of those things will happen. But this has a potential. It's like the toxicity is like palpable there. Like you can feel that game on Sunday is going to be tense for the fans. You can feel that fans might react quickly if the game starts going poorly. So we get down to the last 2 games of the day. 2 games I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. The Fox afternoon game of the week. Packers go out west to face the Los Angeles Rams. The 7-0 undefeated Los Angeles Rams. Will they stay undefeated against the 3-2-1 Green Bay Packers? I think they will. Aaron Rodgers, great player, but I feel like he's going to be under duress for most of this game. We already know he's hobbled. I don't think he'll be at full strength for the rest of the season just because of the demands that his position has. There's really no time for him to get healthy, not completely. And then you have the Rams, that offense, that circus of an offense with Sean McVay, and that cast of characters, Jared Goff, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, and of course Todd Gurley. Cooper Kupp, great player in his own right, He probably will not be playing, so I'm assuming he'll be out. But for today or for this game, I don't think they need him. That Rams offense is humming along. The Packers defense, we've seen them give up points. We saw a 49er team go into Lambeau and put up a lot of points against them. So, I don't think they slow down the Rams enough. Aaron Donald coming off a huge game for the Rams. How will they keep him off of Aaron Rodgers? I would be really nervous as a Packer fan, honestly, because this game feels like the Packers will be throwing the football a lot. And with that said, you have Aaron Donald, you have Ndamukong Suh on the other side. These are beast pass rushers. I would feel very concerned about the safety of our franchise quarterback as we try and navigate a playoff berth. Sitting at 3-2-1, the NFC North is wide open at this point. The Packers find themselves behind Minnesota by a win, but they also have played one last game, so they could possibly be tied for the division lead right now. If they win this game, they could find themselves on top of the division moving forward. But seems like a tall order to ask a Green Bay team go on the road in Los Angeles and win that game. An interesting tidbit here is that if the World Series gets to Game 5, that game will be following the Rams game. So if you're in the LA area, it's possible you could see Goff, Rodgers, and then Kershaw, Chris Sale, as those are the expected pitchers for Game 5 if it gets there in the World Series. So would not be a bad day, although we know about traffic in LA. I don't know if you'd even get there. I don't even know if you'd get there in time to see the baseball game at night, as sad as that is. But yeah, this should be a good football game, though. I would be surprised if the Packers won. A lot of these games, I wouldn't be surprised if they swung the other way, but I would be surprised to see the Rams lose at home against this Packers team. The last game that we need to talk about, though, NBC, it's the night game. New Orleans Saints, they traveled to Minnesota last time they were there. I hope you guys remember. Divisional playoff. Stephon Diggs, touchdown. Not sure what happened with the Saints defensive back on that play. Not sure what that safety was thinking. But that play will go down in the history of football, history of Minnesota Vikings. This is one of the biggest plays of all time. Improbable as it was, Minnesota won that game. So this is kind of a revenge game for the Saints. Drew Brees and the Saints have come in at 5-1. They have been just playing very good football lately. You know, the Vikings, they have been playing good football too. They had a couple shaky games there, but we'll see. We'll see. You know, it's interesting too. New Orleans started last season and finished in Minnesota. They had week 1 in Minnesota and they lost when they were knocked out of the playoffs. So this is, again, a chance for them to get some redemption here. It should be a shootout as we see Kirk Cousins and Drew Brees. I think we'll see them air it out. I think we'll see a high-scoring game. I'm not sure if the Vikings will be able to keep up with the Saints. Actually, you know what? Give me Minnesota. Minnesota wins this game. Yep. I got Minnesota 38-35 over the New Orleans Saints in a shootout. Not sure if I gave my predictions for the other games. I think I said Baltimore 23-21 over the Ravens. I do like the Colts to beat the Raiders just because the Colts are playing a little bit better lately. Kind of going under the radar, Andrew Luck in that offense. I just don't know what's going on in Oakland. I don't know if those receivers are going to be able to get open. The Colts are actually a pretty decent defensive football team, surprisingly enough. I like the Colts 27-24 in that game. And then, of course, I said the Rams would most likely beat the Packers, and I like that game to be 38-24 27 type game. So those are my picks for the week. I'm going to take a short break. When I come back, we'll talk about some notable college football matchups and an interesting story that has to do with NFL officials. And I will talk about that right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for sticking around for the last segment of the GSMC Football Podcast. Again, Mark Souza here. On Monday, I will have my co-host back with me, Jeff Melanoff. He will be back as we take a look at the NFL action that happened this weekend and college football action, of course. I want to talk about an interesting story out of the NFL before moving on to college football. So, I hope everybody's having a good day. Hope everybody's having a better day than Hugo Cruz, who was fired from his job, and his job, of course, NFL official. Down Judge Hugo Cruz was fired for performance reasons by the NFL. It's the first time the NFL has fired an official in season during the Super Bowl era because of performance. Cruz last worked in Week 6. Apparently, his performance had just been too poor lately. The NFL does put their referees in tiers. They're evaluated all the time. You get Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Of course, you need to be in Tier 1 to be considered for a Super Bowl and big games like that. But apparently Cruz's performance was bad enough to allow him to get fired. So it is the first time the NFL Referee Association spoke out against the NFL in defense of their former referee. Talked about the NFL having a knee-jerk reaction and not that it's fair what's going on, but it is what it is. Moving on, NCAA. College football, we have some notable games. I think the biggest game of the weekend in college football would be probably Florida, Georgia. Florida, number 9, Georgia, number 7. It's an SEC matchup that very important. I think the loser here has probably no chance at getting to the college football playoff. Winner has a great chance. Of course, I'm not sure if they'll be able to get in, but they'll need some things to happen in front of them most likely. But Georgia hosts, coming off a bye week against Florida. Should be an interesting game. You know, both these teams, they have good wins this year. This matchup looks particularly close to me, but I like Georgia. I think Georgia takes this win. Look for it to be a shootout. I think we'll see a shootout in this game. Other notable top 25 matchups, Iowa, Penn State. Penn State hosts the Hawkeyes. McSorley for Penn State will look to lead Penn State to top 15 ranking. You would assume if they could win this game, either one of these teams, if they could win this game, they'll get in the top 15, probably closer to the top 10, as we're talking about number 18, number 17 playing each other. So, other notable games, 2 top 25 teams matching up is Washington State as they travel to Palo Alto in California to face the Stanford Cardinal. Washington State just coming off that big win over Oregon. It's another big game for them. I do think they'll pull off the win. I know people like Stanford. They're the slight favorite at 3 points. But I don't know if they score enough points for me. I think Washington State's offense is just good enough to win this game by a touchdown or so, maybe less. We look at the other games, though. Notre Dame, number 3. They play Navy. That should be an easy Notre Dame win. Number 2, Clemson against Florida State. Probably a game that many thought would be big before the season started. But the season has started. Florida State's lost 3 games. Clemson favored by 17. I think they'll win. Continue their path to a playoff berth as a second-ranked team. Other games that we look at, Oklahoma, Kansas State. There's a rivalry game. Oklahoma has moved to number 8 as they look to approach the top 5 as we get closer and closer to the end of the season. Oklahoma, big favorite, 25 points. Washington and Cal. Number 15, Washington. Unranked Cal. Interesting game here. Washington again, another team. I feel like they might be a little fortunate to be ranked 15, but they can continue their path as a team that wants to win the Pac-12. So we'll see how they do. Texas and Oklahoma State. Number 6, Texas. You know, they're a team that can make some noise. But they'd have to handle Oklahoma State first. They travel on the road. Oklahoma State, I think they can make some noise in this game. Slight favorite for Texas at 3 points. I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma State pulls off the upset. This is a game that I'm kind of circling as, like, when I look at the top 10 teams that are playing, I think that game has the most potential of an upset. We'll see what happens. Oregon and Arizona play out west in the Pac-12. Number 19, Oregon, as they look to rebound. Arizona unranked, of course. So not a whole lot going on in college football in terms of notable matchups other than Florida, Georgia, the 9 and the 7, Iowa and Penn State, 18 versus 17, and Washington State, Stanford, 14 and 24. Other than that, not a lot of notable college football games. Tonight, you can see Utah play UCLA, 23 ranked Utah. And UCLA looks for another win after a terrible start in the Chip Kelly era. So take a look for that. But this is the end of today's football podcast. We'll see you on Monday again. It'll be me and Jeff Malinoff on Monday. We'll be talking about all the action from this weekend. We'll preview the Monday Night Football matchup between the Pats and the Bills. We'll do all that. We'll talk about everything in the world of football, including college, on Monday. So we'll see you then. You have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.